Hi, and thanks for joining us for this session on the idea of responsibility, research, and application. This is another of the Good Project's professional development sessions, and today's session is going to be all about this concept of responsibility. We're going to look at some research that we did as a team that originated this concept or this framework of responsibility as a series of rings. And then we're going to think together about how we can apply it to our lives and hopefully to learning environments with students. So take a look at this question here. To whom or what are you responsible? This is a really powerful question for you to sit and think and reflect upon for a bit. And you can also think about this question in different ways. To whom or what are you responsible in your work, in your life, or maybe even in particular environments? How do your responsibilities shift depending on whether you are participating in a particular activity or at your work or in a particular hobby community that you might be a part of? Our team asked people about their views of responsibility at work and used that question, to whom or what are you responsible, in research interviews that were conducted with a variety of professionals over the course of over 10 years. And these were professionals drawn from medicine, law, education, philanthropy, theater, journalism, genetics, and more. And during these conversations, the researchers had the chance to really delve deeply into people's sense of responsibility, particularly in relation to their work, through a variety of different questions. So participants, these professionals, they were asked, to whom or what do you feel responsible? And were also asked follow-up questions about what that meant for handling particularly difficult situations in the workplace, what that meant for their sense of their values and how they made decisions each day. And there were a lot of different commonalities in how people spoke about their responsibilities, but also a lot of variety. So it seemed like these responsibilities that people were describing, no matter their field or profession or how long they had been in their work, they spoke to a variety of different categories. And so people often talked about a sense of responsibility to their own success or well-being, maybe primarily to themselves. They spoke about as well their families, so feeling a sense of responsibility to support maybe children, loved ones, and even extended family. They spoke about their colleagues and their workplace, an ideal. Some people spoke about ideas or ideals. These might be particularly important values, like a responsibility to embody, for example, curiosity in the workplace, a religious or spiritual belief. So a lot of people talked about responsibility to their faith or to their God, a community otherwise that people were part of. Maybe that's like I was describing a particular group of people. A professional ideal that's relevant to the field, maybe for something like medicine, you could imagine the Hippocratic Oath, but other professions also have such ideals. And then a lot of people also spoke about the world at large. So, what their responsibilities were to not only these maybe more close rings, or even as you get further out to a community or a profession, but even to society as a whole or to the world in certain respects. And how you can visualize these different areas of responsibility is as a model of rings, and we call this the rings of responsibility model or framework. So you can see here, you can kind of think about responsibilities with yourself at the center, others who are close to you, these could be family, friends, immediate colleagues, as the next ring out, your sense of community, or maybe your workplace as this third ring out, even going further to profession, and then finally at the outer reaches to the wider world. There might even be something beyond this. Maybe that's where a sense of faith or God fits in, that's all encompassing for people. But these rings of responsibility have been really powerful for people in thinking about how they make decisions in the workplace and in also helping students think about how they make decisions day to day in their lives or in their work as students. And so this rings of responsibility model is something that you can use in order to think about not only your own responsibility, but with your learners in order to help analyze decision making and also tensions between responsibilities. There's been a lot written about this framework of responsibility, so I just wanted to show here or plug here this book, Responsibility at Work: How Leading Professionals Act or Don't Act Responsibly, which had a lot of information. If you are curious to dig further into the idea of responsibility at the Good Project, feel free to pick up this book and see a little bit more about certain case studies or examples of how responsibility can function at work. But I wanted to also give you the opportunity, whether you're solo or are watching this video with others, to think for a second about your own responsibilities and have the chance to apply this framework to your own life. So if you think using this framework about your own experiences, how would you categorize your own responsibilities in each ring using this model? Maybe you want to take a moment to even list out the responsibilities you feel at each one of these rings. And then look, do you have more responsibilities in one or another of these rings? And you could also do that comparatively between your work and your broader life. If you were to think about responsibilities at work versus responsibilities that you feel maybe in other areas of your life, how do your responsibilities differ between those two viewpoints? Just might be enlightening. And it also gives you the opportunity to apply this framework to yourself in a way that hopefully gives you a deeper understanding. And then you can take this and maybe apply it with others, whether that's your learners, your students, or even your colleagues. So take a moment to do that. You might want to pause the video here and then I'll move us on. So now that you've had a chance to think about your own responsibilities, just wanted to delve in a little bit deeper on this connection between the idea of responsibility and particularly ethical work. So if you've taken part in other of the Good Project's professional development sessions, you know that we have this particular framework of good work that encompasses three elements. So excellence or high quality, ethics or social responsibility, and engagement or feeling a sense of meaning or connection to your work. And you can see here, and even in the words I just used, that ethics is connected really strongly to this idea of social responsibility. So when you pay attention to the various rings of responsibility, even at those outermost levels, and you're really taking the time to think about how the work that you do or how the decisions that you make affect all of those rings and all of the responsibilities that you hold, we think that it makes it more likely that you will make ethically sound decisions. When responsibilities conflict, that's where we might face ethical dilemmas or dilemmas in general that make it difficult for us to make choices and also might make it difficult to make choices that align with certain ethical standards. So if you think about a conflict between certain rings, that could be a moment where you feel a responsibility, for example, to yourself is maybe conflicting with a responsibility you feel to your profession. And maybe that leading you to make certain decisions that could or could not be ethical. So again, thinking through responsibilities, really aligning in certain respects with this idea of doing ethical work, I think is really at the fore and in how you can use this framework to hopefully help map responsibilities to make better and more ethical decisions. I wanted to pull in now some local examples of even how to apply this rings of responsibility framework and talk about maybe conflicts between the rings in some real life events. So these are real life events that have happened here in the Boston area where our team is situated. And I'm pulling these at the end of 2024 when these examples have been a little bit in the news. But just to give you some I guess, fodder for brainstorming for yourself about how you might, in whatever context you are in, whatever locality or whatever type of learner you're working with, how you might be able to bring in examples that are relevant to the groups and the students that you are in interactions with day to day. We know that relevance is really important for students being able to identify and find common ground with the content that they are learning about, and also hopefully lead to greater engagement in the classroom in certain respects. And so just want to give you this prompt to be thinking about maybe some local examples of your own as I describe these, and then you'll have the opportunity to do that in a couple of minutes. So this first example is an example that came from an issue that happened here in Massachusetts, where there was this corporation called Steward healthcare that was running a series of hospitals here in Massachusetts. And unfortunately, the series of hospitals went bankrupt. But during the time that even the health company Steward was in crisis, the CEO of the health company was taking lavish trips on a personal jet and also taking trips on not even one, but multiple yachts. And this has led to a lot of public outcry over the fact that people were not able or are no longer able to even be getting the medical care that they need in their communities. But the CEO who was leading the company was kind of taking advantage of the perks and also the funds and salary that he had available to him to be living this really lavish lifestyle while people were kind of suffering. And so this is an example of maybe somebody, if we put ourselves in the CEO's shoes, maybe he was feeling a responsibility to himself or maybe to his family or even perhaps to certain shareholders in the company to really just be, trying to maximize profits, even at the expense of wider society or community. So perhaps there's a conflict there between those rings of responsibility. You could see this example as feeling a responsibility to oneself and kind of taking that as the be all end all and choosing that over a responsibility to a society or community, where there was maybe an alternative choice that was possible that could have balanced those rings of responsibility a little bit better. And then this is a more positive example. So we can see here, maybe this is an example where people are thinking through in at least an implicit way, if not an explicit way, the rings of responsibility in a way that leads to a more ethical decision. So this is just a news story about cranberry farmers here in Massachusetts who are installing solar panels on their cranberry bogs in a way that's going to help not only themselves stay afloat, but also contribute to this green energy transition that we know we need to be going through for reasons of climate change. And so this is an interesting example, and you can see here maybe there's different responsibilities at play that are leading to this maybe more beneficial outcome at multiple levels. So there's maybe a responsibility to yourself as the cranberry farmer to be thinking, I really need to be making sure that my business and my farm is sustainable. How do I continue this way of life? Maybe a responsibility to feeling this value and tradition. Cranberries have been grown for a long time here in Massachusetts. Feeling like, how am I going to continue this? And then finding a way where you not only are able to continue your business, you're able to stay afloat for your community and be there as a business in the community, but also maybe contribute in certain ways to the wider world, again, in this energy transition where you're having a positive impact on the world at large. So now that you've heard a couple of examples, I want you to consider, hopefully, what localized examples related to responsibility and decision making might you be able to bring into your own learning environments. And these could be, again, examples that show maybe a more troubling aspect of people's conflicts and responsibilities. It could show maybe more positive examples like the cranberry farmers. And think across maybe current events or something happening in your community or even something happening in your school, maybe an issue that students care about a lot or are thinking about, or an incident that might have taken place. How could you bring an example into your own classroom or your own learning environment that might be helpful for your students or learners to talk about? So again, if you're in a group or if you're on your own, you might take a few minutes to maybe independently think and research. You could look up some examples online and write down some ideas, and then take a second either to think about how to bring this back to your classroom, or if you're in a group, to chat with others and see what you all have come up with and how you can apply it to your work. Okay, so a third thing that I want you to think about now, you've had a chance to think about responsibility in your own life, and you've also had a chance to think about some examples you might discuss with students. I also want to talk about the fact that, at least at the time that the researchers were doing this initial set of interviews and research into the nature of good work with people of a variety of ages, and they also spoke with adolescents who were still in secondary school, who were particularly passionate or high achieving about a particular field. It was noticed at that time that Responsibility and how people talked about responsibility tended to change across ages. So younger people tended to focus more on themselves and their immediate others, so those inner rings. And that's perhaps not surprising. A lot of young people in adolescence, developmentally appropriately, are focused on their self-development, and so this trend kind of made sense. I'm curious whether maybe that would change nowadays, especially as we see globalization making a lot more young people aware of global issues, and a lot of young people are really actually at the vanguard and thinking about the wider world and in pushing us to make changes in certain ways in society. But then older people tended to be the ones in the research who talked about the outer rings as well, in addition to those inner rings. So, talking about the wider world and how their work might affect their profession or other people who were even unseen to them. And that could be because maybe older people tend to feel that they were in positions more perhaps of authority or had the power to be making decisions that impacted others. Maybe younger people as well didn't feel as much that way. So just wanted to highlight this point through this discussion of the way that responsibility tended to change across the age range. It really involves a systemic viewpoint as well. So recognizing the interconnectedness that we all are shaped by and the effects of our actions on others as a result of that. So none of us are an island. We all exist in society and are affected by the decisions of one another day to day. And so that's a really important discussion point to be bringing into any discussion of responsibility when you have it with your learners. But based on what I've said, this is a final set of reflection questions or discussion points that you might want to delve into. So thinking about your own learners, how do you think they would map their responsibilities onto the rings today? What might they think about their own responsibilities? How can you apply the rings of responsibility with your students or your learners in ways that will help them understand the concept of responsibility in new ways? So maybe there's a discussion that you really want to have, having heard some of these ideas. And then what are you already doing that connects to this concept? So there might be certain connections that you see within subject areas. For example, maybe you've read a novel with your students if you're a language teacher, and you feel like there is a connection in talking about responsibility with perhaps the characters in that work of literature. Or maybe there's some historical discussion to have, or even a scientific discussion to have. So just thinking about what are you already doing that might connect with this concept. And as a final wrap up, you might want to take a moment to think about something either of these sentence stems might complete. So either I want to share something perhaps that you want to share an idea from this concept or an idea from this workshop with others, or I want to take action by. So that would be something that you'd like to maybe go and do as a result of this workshop today. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, we welcome your comments.